wasn't, maybe 3 4 seconds.
Firing the 3 rounds, you hit him in the head?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel when you say that?
It's almost like I'm watching a movie.
Is it a 0, 1, 2, 5?
Probably a 0, maybe a half.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
And, it's like the back of his head. I see the back of his head splatter. And, it's like, okay. And then I see the grenade kind of drop out of his hand and roll back behind him. And I hear it explode. Maybe 5, 10 seconds later, all of a sudden here come all these village people tearing out of there. What'd you do to my kid? How come you shot my kid? Never mind, the kid had a grenade and he almost killed a couple of people in the little building.
The grenade did or did not go off?
The grenade did go off. It rolled back behind him probably 20, 30 feet and went off kind of behind a well.
How did you feel when the people came out and were yelling at you?
I was anxious because I didn't know whether I was going to have to shoot.
How do you feel now?
Now I'm really, they're doing what they thought. They didn't understand what was going on.
Are you feeling the anxiousness now?
Not really, no.
Having finished with his most intense memory, we then helped Robert neutralize his second most intense memory. This one had to do with the wiping out of a village. We used the same technique and got the same result, that is, 0 emotional intensity. We tune in now at the end of this second intense memory as Robert inadvertently pays these techniques the ultimate compliment. He yawns and says he is bored. In normal social situations, this may be considered rude, but we are delighted. Remember, he is dealing with traumatic memories that have haunted him for decades and cause him nightmares.
I don't feel anxious at all.
Good. All right, great. Go ahead.
And I can remember, the dozer digging a big hole. I can remember him digging a big hole and just shoving people in it.
Okay. Why did you yawn?
Boredom, maybe, because I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking how many times I've seen it in the movies, how many times I've seen it depicted in TV.
It was an interesting reaction, and the reason I asked you that was quite often people, when they do this, they get so relaxed as a result of tapping the energy system.
Yeah, well,
they literally start to lose, they think they're losing energy, but what they're doing is they're being very relaxed in a way that they've never been before, if they can remember. Does that fit for you?
Yeah, because I've never, really felt like, okay, hey, it happened. It's just like I'm watching a movie.
I want you to do something for me, okay? I want you to go back to the first scene, and I want you to imagine shooting the boy, and tell me what kind of emotional intensity you have about that.
Boredom.
Boredom.
Yeah.
Okay. That's better than the other one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. You have to get going.
Yeah.
One final visit with Robert. He came in for another session the next morning and reported that he had had his best night's sleep in 5 years. I then tested the kid emotion one more time to see if the passage of 24 hours had brought anything back. Please notice that he has no trace of it left.
It doesn't bother me at all.
It doesn't bother you at all?
No.
Even the part where you shot the boy in the head?
No, because I look at that like, hey, I had to do it. It was me or him. Now I'm looking at it like, okay, it's him or I. There's no two ways. There's no two ways about it.
Now, what's really interesting for any other vets or anybody else watching this is we did this procedure yesterday, and the parts of it that we directly addressed with the tapping, you don't have any emotional intensity over.
Not really, because I'm looking at it from a rational point of view.
We turn now to an interview with Philip, who discusses his experience with these techniques. Right now, regarding PTSD.
Yes.
And so you've had some of the traumatic, intrusive memories and all that goes with that.
Yes.
And so we've been dealing with that. And so while we haven't been on camera dealing with these things, you have been experiencing some of these things. And one of them was a headache. I mean, you got some relief from headaches, is that correct?
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that? How bad were they to begin with? What did you do, and how did they change?
Just to give you an example, this morning I went for breakfast and we were conversating over this this practice, and it just came to my mind that I might just practice it at that moment, and I practiced it, and I was just amazed how it just disappeared.
Okay, so you had a headache,
yes,
right? And you did the tapping,
right?
And then it went away. On a scale of 0 to 10, how bad was the headache before you started doing the tapping?
I would say about an 8.
About an 8, and did it go to a 1 or a 2 or a 0?
It was 0.
Okay, you also mentioned to me earlier something about anxiety.
Yes.
What was your experience there?
Well, at the time when on the first demonstration, when we were going through that as a group, I had anxiety at that time, and when we were going through the tapping process, it vanished.
Okay,
like a little miracle.
Yeah. How intense was the anxiety? You know, when you first started doing the tapping, before you did the tapping, how intense was that anxiety?
I would say about a number 5.
About a 5.
Yeah, okay. It wasn't a real heavy anxiety, but I was anxiety, you know, and anxiety tends to elevate.
Sure.
Until it changes into something else. But anyway, it was about a 5, and I was just amazed. Because I was questionable whether this really worked or not.
Of course, everybody's skeptical.
Yeah, right.
It's so strange. We also dealt with your anxiety about getting up on a ladder. You had a focused reaction. If I recall it right, you were getting some feelings in your feet and was it your hands?
Yes, some jittery.
So yeah, some jittery feelings just as you thought about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that was on a scale of 0 to 10. I forgot. How intense was that jitteriness when we first started?
I think it was around 8 or 9. It was pretty high.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we started doing this, and the jittery feeling fell, I believe, and so did the feelings in your feet and hands. Why don't you describe what that was?
Well, as we went through the first process, the first time I didn't feel, and then the second time it started dropping, and then the third time it dropped less. I think we did like about 5 times, and it just disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that Philip shared was his insomnia.
Oh, I forgot.
I want to talk about.
Thank you. Yeah, insomnia. You did have some insomnia before we met, and you've had some relief on that. Why don't you explain what that is?
Oh, well, okay. Prior to going to sleep, and I had the problem where I wouldn't sleep, and then I was given instructions to do this before actually going to bed.
The tapping, you mean?
Right, the tapping, yes. So I did the tapping, and wow, I just fell asleep on my own, you know.
How was your night's sleep last night?
Great.
Did you sleep all night?
Yes, all night.
Great.
Did you take any sleeping pills this time?
Without the pill.
Okay, and normally you take sleeping pills?
Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you.
Listen, you're speaking to other vets out there who might be skeptical as well as you were. Would you suggest they try it?
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I sure would.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks,
Phil. That was really nice. Thanks so much.
Gary's PTSD symptoms include minor hallucinations, anxiety attacks, stress, depression, numbness, and headaches. In this session, Adrian uses EFT to address some numbness in his fingers and his most severe traumatic memory. We start, though, with one of his headaches. He woke up this morning with a severe anxiety headache of the type that always leads to a full-blown anxiety attack. He told us before this session that it was an 8, and he was very stressed about what it would lead to. He used what little of EFT that he had learned from an orientation session and was delighted to get some relief on his own. Here's how he tells it.
And said a rather remarkable story of what you did for yourself using a little bit of the techniques that you were exposed to. Could you share that story with us?
Well, this morning I woke up with a typical anxiety headache, and it was concentrated in my right eye, over my right eye. And I was starting to get really stressed out over it. I didn't want to have a bad day. So I started the technique the best I understood it from your orientation. And it worked. The headache moved from over my right eye to the back of my head right here on the left side. And I did it again, and the headache moved to the center of my head. And then I had just done some the technique with Gary, and the headache has gone away completely. Completely.
Good, good.
Next, Gary told us of some numbness in his fingers that were symptomatic of his anxiety attacks. Adrian applied several rounds of EFT and got it down to a very low level.
It's going away between a 0 and a 0.5.
I'll take that.
It's going away. I'll take it too, really, because this morning it was like an 8.
But do you feel any of it right now?
No.
Okay. And that has not happened to you where you felt this free of it for all these years?
Well, I felt this free of it on a good day,
Okay.
an exceptional day.
Okay.
It's about the same as an exceptional day for me.
Okay. Good.
You know, medication and other therapies, and then rest, and just a perfect day.
Okay.
So it's about as good as that.
Good.
Adrian then shifts to work on Gary's most intense traumatic memory. Gary tells her that he was given orders to fire on what was believed to be the enemy, but which turned out to be innocent civilians. She then asks how intense that memory is as he recalls it.
There's a lot of guilt involved.
And the guilt is?
That these were civilians and not enemy, Vietnamese.
All right, when you think about the guilt part, give me a number from...
8.
It's an 8 right now?
Yeah, it's always an 8.
All right, I'd like to work on that.
8 to 10.
Okay.
Right now?
Right now.
Well, it's an 8 right now. It's an 8.
All right, I'd like to work on that.
Okay.
Then, after a few brief rounds of EFT, Adrian finishes the techniques and tests it by having him retell it.
Okay. If it was a 2, what does it feel like?
0.
It's a 0.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you go back and tell me about this again?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like you to tell me about you secured the landing
Secured an
zone.
LC for the evening, and there was civilian movement outside the perimeter of the LC, and we laid out some fire.
And you fired.
Right.
And it was pie-shaped type
Right.
pattern.
Patterns.
And it was innocent civilians.
Mm-hmm.
Is it still 0?
Still 0.
What does the numbness feel like in your hand?
Numbness, it's still noticeable, but not barely noticeable.
Okay.
Barely.
Okay. And
I feel more relaxed. Very relaxed.
Good. When you realized now, if you're reliving it, at the time that you shot, did you immediately know it was civilians?
No.
All right, so keep going on with the story.
Well, we didn't know till about daybreak. We went out for a sweep, did a perimeter sweep, and found that it was civilians.
All right, now you're reliving the scene and you're seeing that it's civilians.
Mm-hmm.
What does the guilt feel like now?
I don't feel any guilt.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to get a little more intense still. I'm talking about right now.
Okay.
But how did you know they were civilians? Did you see faces?
Right. Okay. It was daybreak. The sun was coming up. It was just before the sun came up, and we could tell they weren't. They were carrying personal belongings instead of weapons.
How did you feel then when you saw them?
I was horrified.
How do you feel now when you talk about it?
I feel okay with it.
0, 2, 3?
I'd say 0.
Okay.
I feel okay with it.
Okay. Is there more to that story, Gary?
There is a little.
Let's go on.
Well, when we saw there were civilians, we were instructed to dig a trench and bury them right there. So there was a lot more guilt.
Sure. What does it feel like to you now?
Much better.
Is it, give me a number if you can.
It's a 0.
It's a 0,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a 0.
Adrian and I wanted to close this out by giving you a little idea of what didn't make the camera here. We only dealt with a few of the vets that we've shown you on this, and a number of them either couldn't be on the camera for security purposes or whatever. But altogether, we spent time with these men and took care of, it was at least 20, because I counted them, traumatic memories that they had had at the war experience. And in every single case, they went down to 0.